Good morning, y'all. It's morning here for a few more seconds anyway. This is the portion of the show where I go ahead and just start streaming a little bit with this little screen up here up front and let the clock on the wall do its 12 o'clock bong bong bong. Let all the notifications go out. And when the clock on the wall stops with the bong bong bong, I click a little button and say, Afternoon, y'all. How are you doing today? Hope everyone is well. Thank you for spending part of your Sunday with me. I really do appreciate it. Live Q&A number 41. Man, seems like only yesterday I started doing these. Before I get into the regular stuff going down the roll call, there is one question I want to go ahead and answer right now. And that is Thomas Grimm asks, because there's a one-to-one correspondence between Sunday morning and Sunday afternoon, should the numbering difference be reconciled? And I get where you're coming from, but the doing the live Q&As started long after I got going on the Absolute Beginner series, and I do a live Q&A whether I'm doing an Absolute Beginner series video or an Aspire video or a build video or what have you. So the live Q&A numbers and the Absolute Beginner series numbers are never going to match. And so reconciling them would, it might help, but probably not. So, it's just one of those things, Thomas. Yeah, what can I say? So good morning, y'all. Well, good afternoon now officially for the last minute. Let's go ahead and take a roll call here. I know we get an international crowd and I love it. Let's see. We have Francisco, no last name. That's cool. You're 10 times cooler if you're known by just one name. Ice Cream 62, how are you doing today in Italy, my friend? Hope you and yours are all doing well. Steve Nealon from Harneal Media, sponsor of Mark Lindsay CNC.com. Your one-stop shop for all things internet. If you want a website, if you want a web store, if you want to design and create some merch to sell, he's your man. He can hook you right up. He'll do as much or as little as you want to. And that's what makes it great. Thanks for spending part of your Sunday with me, Steve. Let's see, we have Thomas Grimm and Dave Kraus, Jeff Rozak down there in Florida, Steve Late in London. It's 8 in the evening there. Boy, yeah, and we're sitting at straight up 12 noon where I'm sitting here in Southern Oregon. Dale Francis, John Cousins, would if I could. Good afternoon, John, joining us from Canada. Mike Smith, also there in Central Florida. Let's see, Mr. Michael K.C. from Jacksonville, Florida. Man, Florida's a popular place today. Well, or a popular place to be watching from. Kevin Els from South Africa. Grant, good afternoon, Grant. How are you doing? I got an answer for you on your questions. We've been having the back and forth on the comments. Troy Barkhouse, Michael Bell, Bob Heltebrighter. Wow. Let's just hope this isn't, a preview of things to come. I can't speak. Bob Heltebrighter, poster of all things rude, crude, socially unacceptable, and just downright funny. Mike Smith, Graham Wright from Northants, UK. Let's see. Carl Gehrke. Gehrke? Or is it Gehrke? Terry Baker from Oklahoma. Wayne Hurl. Bill Deerhake from Houston. Let's see. Jim Hester. Jason Pulliam. Ice Cream says the lockdown ended in Italy. Sweet deal. Good. Well, let's hope everybody doesn't go crazy and just bring those numbers back up. You know what I mean? Let's see, Carl Hollowell from the UK. And W4FEJ. I'm not even going to attempt. Welcome, Mike from North Carolina. How you doing today? Um, let's get into a little bit of what I was talking about on the ramps and leads video, the follow-up as we discussed last week. Good afternoon, Tim. Welcome aboard. Glad to see you show up. Thanks for spending part of your Sunday with me. Basically, when we talked last week, I did this video, this mini series, this way for two reasons. Number one, the first video, I wanted to show how ramps work by themselves. And I wanted to show how leads work by themselves. And I showed you one way of combining them. I didn't want to confuse matters by throwing too much stuff out there. So by understanding how a ramp works and how a lead works, you kind of have a better idea of what's going on and a better way of using one or the other. Now, as I said in the video, I very, very rarely use leads. In fact, I think I've only used them once or twice. And that's basically the whole purpose of a lead, is to get the tip of that tip of that router bit down into the material in just any place away from the vector you're trying to cut. And that's usually on wood or materials that like to splinter or chip out. Red oak is one. It's an open grain wood that likes to splinter. If you're using nice sharp bits, and I tend to use downcut spirals a lot, because on my projects, the surface that I'm carving is the important one. And the back is going to get sanded, and I may even round over the back. So splintering and chip out on the back is really not as important to me as the top surface. So using a lead is just there for like plywood, melamine, things of that nature, where you got to get the tip of that bit down into the material so that initial plunge or that initial ramp doesn't chip out and blow out the top surface. Even with a downcut bit, that can sometimes happen. Like I said, I very rarely use them, so leads aren't as important to me as ramps are. Now, I ramp just about every outside profile that I cut. And that's mainly because it's easier on the bit, it's easier on the machine, but mainly it's easier on the material. Anytime that spinning bit, you figure if you look at your RPMs, depending upon whether you're using a fixed speed router or a variable speed router or a air or water cooled spindle, you're spinning that bit anywhere from about 14 to up to 26,000 RPM. And even if it's got a cutting edge all the way across the bottom of that bit, that is still an impact. So when that bit spinning that fast hits that wood, that's an impact. And that wood or that plastic or that foam, whatever you're cutting, is going to react to that. And I just find that by ramping in and easing that bit into the material, I get a better finish. I get a better end result. And that's what this is all about for me. And this is just one man's opinion. But if it takes an additional 3 seconds for that bit to ramp in, I'm a home hobbyist. I can eat that 3 seconds. I just don't care. Now, if you're into hot and heavy production, time is money. And I understand if you're trying to put out 1,000 parts a day, maybe you can afford to skip the ramp and just plunge on through. But if you're in that kind of a high volume production, you're probably not watching me anyway. So, So anyway, there is that. Now, I did have a question over in the comments from Ayal Peleg, who asked me, how do you decide the length of the lead in, and what effect will making the lead in shorter or longer have? Basically, the length of the lead won't really have a whole heck of a lot of effect. That is 100% up to you. It's going to lengthen or shorten the machining time, but by only a couple of seconds. So it's 100% arbitrary. Again, like I say, what matters is getting that bit into the material away from the vector you're trying to cut to avoid any splintering, chip out, or shredding, ripping, whatever. So that's the main reason for those leads. And the length doesn't really matter so long as you're getting that tip of that bit in there before it gets to the vector you're going to cut. Now, that's if you're not ramping. If you are ramping in conjunction with a lead, the shorter that lead is, the steeper that angle of that ramp is going to be. And there comes a point to where you're dealing with diminishing returns. The steeper that ramp is, the less effective the ramp is, in that you're putting just as much stress on the bit and on the material and on the machine as if you didn't use a ramp at all. So I try to keep all my ramps somewhere around in the 30 degree, anywhere from 20 to 30 degree angle area. And I find that by going, just depends on the bit, because you can get ridiculous in that too. On a 1/4 inch bit, if I go somewhere between 1 and 2 inches of distance on a 1/4 inch bit, that gives me a nice gentle slope. On an 1/8 inch bit, somewhere between 3/4 of an inch and an inch is fine for a ramp on an 1/8 inch bit. And those are the most common sizes I use. So, the length of the ramp is basically up to you, whatever it takes to get the desired result. The length of the ramp and the length of the lead. So now in using my big finishing bit that I use, not finishing bit, resurfacing bit, that I use to surface my spoil board, I will set my ramp at double the cutting diameter of the bit. It's an 1.25 inch bit, so I set it for 2.5 inches is the distance of the ramp. And that clears away the material as it's ramping in. That clears away the material so I don't end up with uncut material under the center of the bit because it doesn't have a cutter all the way across. And I don't want that bit bottoming out on uncut material. So by going double the bit's cutting diameter, it eases in nice and gentle and clears away all that material before the bottom of that bit bottoms out on that wood. So we've had a few more people jump in. Let's see here. Troy Pritchard, how you doing today, Troy? Dave Matthews, Mike Urbani, Richard Poulin. Hey, never worry about being late because you're working in the shop. In fact, shop time's always more important than me. Dave Gatton, the man, the myth, the legend. Stopping by to hit the thumbs up. Thank you much, Dave. I do appreciate it. Let's see now. W4FEJ wants to know, do I have any tutorials on making raised panel doors? No, I do not. Mainly because I don't need any raised panel doors made. I probably could, but raised panel doors, that's one of those things where it's almost easier to set up a router table to do. Now, I understand some folks want to use a CNC mainly for the panels. Probably not so much the stiles and rails. You could cut out, if you're doing like a cathedral top or something like that, you could cut out the top rail on the CNC so that you know the radius matches your panel, and then design the panel. Maybe I will do a tutorial on that. So we'll see. But I just, generally speaking, the projects I do are the projects I need. And I haven't had a need for a raised panel door, but I will look into that. So Let's see. Let me go up here a little bit and see if we have any other questions up here about it. Mike Smith says, finally got an explanation of the separate last pass. Yeah, separate last pass is something I do almost all the time as well, because it cleans up a lot of mistakes. It cleans up, well, I don't mean mistakes necessarily, but those witness marks on the edge. It cleans up any dwell marks and what have you. And it just gives a cleaner finished surface because that bit never breaks contact with the edge of the material you're cutting out. And so I use ramps and a separate last pass on just about every profile I cut out. So let's see here. Dave Matthews got another clock gear cut today. Can't wait to see this clock you're building, Dave. This is really going to be cool. Let's see. Richard wants to know, have you tried photo carving? Not yet. It is something that I want to do. I just haven't gotten to it yet. I'm working on 3 things right now. One of them is a photo carve. Another is inlays. And another is some different finishing techniques. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, I'm also doing landscaping outside and trying to get site prep for a new shop and the whole thing. But, so no, the short answer is I don't have photo carving video. I am going to be getting into it. I just have to get there. I have so many things on my list. It's just not the top of the priority right now. So let's see. Mike Smith, I notice you use climb cut quite often. Is that your usual? I bounce back and forth. Climb cutting is generally accepted as giving you a better finish. I find that that's true on some woods and not true on others. Now, I did a video about climb cutting, but I'm going to break tradition and I'm not going to link that video because I made a couple of just factual errors in it. And in fact, I think I'm going to revisit it in a future video. Basically, the difference is and I get them confused, which is one reason why I don't talk about this subject very often. I've got to go sit down and actually get it right in my head before I talk about it. And it's either climb cutting or conventional. You're moving the bit with the direction of the cut, the direction the bit is spinning, and in the other, you're moving the bit in opposition to that. And generally speaking, climb cutting will give you a better finish, but it's been my experience that that is not always the case. So I use climb cutting more than I use conventional, but I still do use conventional on occasion. Just depends on what I'm cutting. So let's see. Mike Urbani is asking spiral with a question mark. I don't know what that's in reference to. But let's see. Mr. Michael KC, do you happen to have a video on making a spoil board? I have, I think, I don't remember if it's 2 or 3 videos on making a spoil board, making my spoil board for my Gatton CNC. I used strips of MDF and aluminum T-track. And basically I figured out my spacing, screwed down my T-track, cut strips of MDF, and glued them down to the table. I immediately got asked, why are you gluing that MDF down to your CNC table? What's going to happen when you want to replace it? My answer to that is, why would I want to replace it? What I'm doing is using the spoil board, and I don't baby my spoil board at all, and then resurface it when it needs it. And when I get it milled down to where it's level with the top of the T-track, I'll do that final finish pass, resurface, and I'll glue some 1/4-inch MDF on top of it, surface that, and drive on. I should never have to remove one of those pieces of MDF spoil board. But if I do, I have a CNC. I'll just cut it out. So it's no big deal. But yes, I will link the spoil board videos in the description of this video as soon as we get done live. And I'll do... And I just made a note to myself to do that. So, hope that answers your question. Dustin Fournier, hey Mark, if I cut a pocket in plywood and fill with epoxy, what's the best way to get it flat after it dries if I overfilled it? The best way is to use a drum sander. The more realistic way, if you don't have a drum sander, is be careful how much you fill. And I use a random orbit sander. And just, I used, I want to say 80 grit to get it down, on the epoxy only, not on the plywood. Use the 80 grit to kind of get it flattened down, and then I switched over to 120. Take that back, 150, then 220. Another little tip for you here, Dustin. If you are tinting the epoxy, put some polyurethane in that pocket before you pour your epoxy. Otherwise, the epoxy will act just like paint and will wick into the pocket. You got to seal that up first. Now, some folks don't like to use polyurethane. They like to use untinted epoxy, and that's fine. But you got to seal. Every time you cut into a piece of wood, you are making end grain. And if you do a paint fill or an epoxy fill, either one, it will wick into that end grain you just created. So seal it up. And you can use, like I said, a lot of people use polyurethane, which is compatible with most epoxies. But if you're unsure, mix up some untinted epoxy and kind of brush it in there to seal those fibers before you pour that tinted epoxy in there. I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt, and that piece is not around anymore. It's gone. That's one of the few I didn't throw onto the burn pile because I'm not into burning epoxy. Thank you very much. But yeah, I have done epoxy inlays. I've not done a video on that. I probably should. And in fact, the shelf project was going to be an epoxy fill, but as I said, the design committee changed their mind, and that just didn't happen. So let's see. Mariana, how are you doing? First time to catch me live. It's first time to talk to you live too. So she also reflects, she repeats, always seal before you epoxy. Exactly. And seal before you paint as well. Otherwise, you can end up with a big mess. Ice Cream 62 says, remember to ask the Vectric guys to manage the... Well, it's not a bug that I found with the zigzag lead. It's just a question that I had about it. And as far as letting the Vectric guys know, yeah, I'm going to the Vectric Users Group meeting in San Diego this September. So if any of y'all are going to be there, please look for me. I'll be there as an attendee. I'm not speaking or doing any presentations or anything. I have a list that I'm writing down of things that I'm going to talk to them about, and that is on the list. So I'm going to ask them why. Now, back to the comments over on the YouTube channel on the video this morning. Who was it? It was David Dietrich said, as far as the ramp on the lead-in with the separate last pass, could it be that since you can reverse the direction of cut on that separate last pass, could that be why it doesn't add that ramp, because it would basically make it kind of run in the wrong direction. Well, that's a possibility, and it's not one that I'd considered when I made the video. So I'm definitely going to ask them about that. So, I really don't know, because it is a separate LastPass. Maybe the software doesn't recognize it as part of that toolpath. But then again, why would it? And if you have ramp on lead in, shouldn't it count for that separate LastPass as well? So I'm going to ask them about it. Maybe it's something they overlooked or didn't think about, or something that they just don't know. So I'm not ready to say that it's a bug, but it's something that they should be able to take care of. So Bill Deerhake says, for a threaded spoil board, try Ben Myers or Winston Moy. Yes, both of them have excellent channels, Ben Myers and Winston Moy. My two main reasons for not going with a threaded spoil board was I tend to use the T-tracks on my spoil board to hold jigs and fixtures, and I want to be able to move those jigs and fixtures around. And the T-track is just more adjustable for me. I don't have to deal with fixed locations. The other reason is I have seen threaded inserts pull out, and even the threaded inserts that you pound in from the bottom, that's a lot of holes to drill and a lot of threaded inserts. It's mainly the adjustability of T-track is why I went with it. I don't use clamps a lot. I tend to either use the masking tape and CA glue method, or just screw it down. Like I said, I don't baby my spoil board. It's there for a reason, and I use it to its fullest extent. And it's pretty battered. It's about time for resurfacing. But it's just personal preference. I'm not saying one is better than the other. It's just that the T-track was more adjustable for my situation, so that's what I went with. So let's see. Mariana asked, do I have to file my Z-plate when it's scratched? It's off by about a hair. The only problem with that is you've got to make sure that you're removing the same amount for filing that touch plate. Now, I don't know what kind of touch plate you have, whether it's homemade or store-bought or what have you. I would get a hold of the people that made the touch plate, unless it's homemade. If it's homemade, you can try it. You don't have to, but you can try it. If you're talking about just Z0, can you just Z0 in another place, in another area? I mean, mine is scratched up too, but, it's generally speaking not off. Not enough to worry about anyway. Unless it's a major gouge. If it's a major gouge, then, there might be a problem. But as far as accuracy is concerned, remember, we're working with wood. Now, I know a lot of machinists who, when they switch over to wood, they carry that machinist mentality over with them. And wood is just more forgiving. It doesn't care if it's 0.02 off. Because when you add glue to a mortise, the wood's going to swell more than that 0.02 from the moisture in the glue anyway. So I would, okay, I see what you're saying here now. It's Shark HD5 touch plate. I would talk to the people at, I think that's Next Wave Automation. I would talk to them and see what they think. If it's a huge gouge, you might want to replace it. If it's just a few scratches, you should be okay. I would be nervous about filing unless you are absolutely certain you can file it nice and smooth and even across the whole surface. And then you're going to have to remeasure and re-enter your touch plate thickness after that, because it's going to change. So, Okay, let's see. Jeff Mark says, who all can go to the Vectric user meeting? Anybody that wants to. I will put a link in the description box below. When we finish here, I'll make a note of it right now. Alrighty. I'll put a link to the Vectric announcement for the user group meeting. It's in San Diego, California this year. Every year they have a user group meeting in the UK and they have one in the US. And they move it all over the country to kind of give everybody an even shot. And it just happens this year it's in San Diego. I think last year it was in Denver, and the year before that it was in Florida, I believe. But anybody, I mean, it's open to the general public. Anybody who wants to attend the user group meeting is welcome to come, but it is a training class environment and there is a cost. It's $250 to attend the user group meeting, but it's 2 full days of classes and intense training. So anybody is welcome to come. And it is, I want to say September 25th, 26th, or 26th, 27th. It's right in that area there. I'll put a link in the description to this as soon as it becomes a regular video. But yeah, it's great. It'll be my first time attending, and I can't wait. I'm real anxious to go. The folks from Vectric will be there, Becky and the rest, so I can't wait to meet them all. So, let's see. Grant wants to know, or he says, if the touch plate is aluminum, couldn't you use an aluminum mill and resurface it, remembering to update the software to the new thickness? I was hesitant to recommend that, mainly because I'm not a metal guy at all, and milling aluminum is a whole nother animal. I'm a wood dude, and I've never cut aluminum, so I have a serious philosophical problem with recommending somebody do something I've never done before. So there's enough bad information out there, and I don't want to add to it. So, that's why I'm saying talk to the people at Next Wave. They may say to do exactly that. Shave a little bit off the surface and be done with it. I don't know. I just wasn't ready to make that call personally. So, but Grant, since you're here, there was a question you had about compression bits, their use, and why. Well, let's see here. If I can switch over to share screen here. And I got the wrong photo up. Wow. Let me see here. Go back. This is the one I was after. I flipped it over. Now, this bit is a compression bit, obviously. And you were talking about upcut versus downcut geometry. The entire purpose of a compression bit is to have an upcut portion down here at the tip and a downcut portion up here. The whole purpose of a compression bit is this tip here cuts through the bottom surface of the material that's down against your spoil board in an upcut pattern so that it doesn't chip out. The downcut portion of the bit cuts the top surface of the material so it does in a downward direction so it doesn't chip out. And the compression part in the center is a result of that upcut portion meeting that downcut portion. And this is used, it was designed specifically for melamine, laminated surfaces, plywood, and composites to get a clean, smooth, upcut surface on the bottom of the material and a clean cut downcut surface on the top. That's the whole reasoning behind a compression bit. If you are not concerned with the bottom surface, a regular downcut bit is perfect. If you're not concerned with the top surface, a regular upcut bit is perfect. But the whole point of a compression bit is to cut the bottom surface of the material against your spoil board without splintering, tear out, and chip out. That's the purpose of the compression bit. The compression part in the center, and the reason it's called a compression bit is because this upcut evacuates the chips upward, downcut evacuates the chips downward, and they compress in the center where those two different cutting directions meet. That's the whole purpose of a compression bit. So your quest to find a compression bit with a downcut tip, there just is no such animal. So your better bet would be, if you're not concerned with the bottom of the material, use a downcut to get that clean top surface. If you're not concerned with the top surface of the material, use an upcut bit to get that clean surface down there against the spoil board. If you need both surfaces clean and chip free, a compression bit is the way to go. And you have to get that upcut portion down into the material somewhere away from the vector you're cutting. And that's where a lead comes in, along with the ramp. So I hope that answers the questions there. So, alrighty. Yeah, Jim, I hear you. Hiding from the riots in Louisville, Kentucky. We're under curfew, so can't go to the store. Send wood. Be very careful with that request. You never know what you're going to get. And on that happy note, we've been on for about 36 minutes. I don't want to leave on a bummer like that. But I do want to say thank you guys very, very much for spending part of your Sunday with me. If there are any other questions or comments, please leave them down in the comment section down below. I will try to get to them. If you have sent me an email through the Contact Us form on my website, please understand I have been flooded lately, and I am trying to get to everybody. If I missed you, send me another one. It's becoming more and more overwhelming, and I'm becoming less and less able to get to everybody. I still have folks sending me PM requests on Facebook. I cannot answer them. I get way too many PM requests. They're just simply put not enough hours in a day to answer them all. I will try to get to the emails when I can, but there's no way I can answer PM requests on Facebook. Please hit me up through the Contact Us form, or come back to the live Q&A next week. I don't know what the video is going to be next week. We'll just have to wait and see. I could go one of three directions, but I promise it will not be about ramps and leads again. So, hey, everybody, if you have to, hunker down. If you need to, stay safe. You know, we keep doing the social distance thing. That's great. We're starting to reopen. That's great. You know, I don't believe in slapping fate in the face. Take care of yourself. Take care of you and yours. But remember, this is all supposed to be about fun. So enjoy yourself. Get out in the shop. Do something cool and make some chips. Y'all have a nice day. Y'all take care.